What's good, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle-earth to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin and is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube and or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. I am your host, Anthony. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores, ANT. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, doing a draft recap for the Buffalo Bills 2024 draft class. And that's pretty straightforward. But to do so, I'm bringing back someone who was just here last week. And prior to last week, he was here about a month before that. And when I brought him in for last week's episode, because, you know, he is one of my favorite guests and one of my favorite people, which I know he loves when I say that. I spoke last week about bringing him full circle, or bringing him on to bring things full circle, because I had him on to talk about priorities heading into this offseason and into the draft, and then brought him in last week to kind of put a bow on that heading into the draft. And I thought it just made sense to bring him in on this episode to have our grades, our evaluations, our fit, everything. And my guest for this episode, Mr. Bruce Nolan. Bruce, you are too gracious to join me again for back-to-back weeks. I appreciate you. I like you. I enjoy your company. Welcome to the show. Oh, you're on mute.
It would be so much better if I wasn't muted.
That would be so much better.
I feel like the energy of the show would really be a lot better if I didn't mute myself.
I was really like, man, he's going for the long pause for dramatic effect.
It's dramatic entrance is what it is. It's a little bit like, okay, so you're a professional wrestling guy. Okay.
I am.
It's like when the lights go down.
Nice.
And there's no noise at all. And then the crowd just starts going, and then all of a sudden the beat drops of the intro music and he comes running out of the tunnel. And it's
like it.
Is that, by God, is that Bruce Nolan's music?
Nice.
You know, just like that.
Nice, JR. I liked it. Yeah, but I legitimately I was like, oh, he's going for the pause. And I was like, oh, this is going to be good. And then I was like, this has been too long. And I looked down and I was like, he's on mute. But regardless, like I said, I appreciate you taking the time to join me. I wanted to have you on to bring this whole thing full circle, that would, you know, this whole draft board series that I've been doing leading up to the draft. You were on multiple times, and then to bring it all full circle here, like I said. And what I like about this episode is we're going to be grading each pick, and then thus kind of like the class as it gets put into perspective, but not only just grading the pick from a player standpoint, but really focusing on their fit schematically and structurally within this team. So in this episode, you are going to get player evaluation, scheme, fit, and structure analysis, and all that kind of stuff. We're going to give some ceilings and some floors for each player, and then we are going to discuss and mention whether or not we think they will be getting a second contract with the Buffalo Bills. So very, very fun. And Bruce, as we dive into that real quick, you know, from 1,000-foot view or whatever, high-level thoughts, how do you feel coming out of this draft? Was it everything you hoped it would be? Do you respect Brandon Beane's desire to address specific needs that may or may not have aligned with your own? Where's your head at, you know, as we dive into this episode and kind of come away from this draft?
This draft feels a little bit like a slight shift in identity. I think what we saw is we saw the Buffalo Bills repeatedly at multiple different positions do things that I would consider to be off-brand. Mm-hmm. On one hand, you look at the selection of VPG and you think to yourself, well, that's on brand. I mean, he looks like Mitch Morse, right? Same height, same weight. Oh, short arms. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Oh, he moves really well in space. Oh, look at that. Like, you say, okay, that's totally on brand. Keon Coleman, not on brand. At least not on recent brand. And that's important. How about Javon Solomon? Not on brand. Cole Bishop is on brand for style. I think he's a very Jordan Poyer-ish sort of player, but he is not on brand relative to the investment level that you thought you were going to get at defensive backs. One of the big narratives coming to the draft was, well, you know, Brandon Beane's made it work with lesser drafted players, 6th round, 7th round, free agency picked up. Well, maybe Sean McDermott, being the safety whisperer that he is, maybe just the defensive back whisperer that he is, would say, you know what, get me a 5th round corner, 6th round safety, I'm fine. So that's a little off brand. And so as we get into these individual picks, I think one of the things that I look at overarchingly is that this is kind of off brand for the Buffalo Bills. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just different. For one, they traded down in the first round, which has never happened, but that was just the beginning of the off-brand stuff. So for me, this is deciding all the one day that you're not a Costco person anymore. Now you're a Sam's Club person. It's still a wholesaler.
I like that.
Right?
But it's still a wholesaler.
So for me, this is Sam's Club of draft. You were a Costco guy and you're like, you know what? I'm not doing Costco anymore. I'm out. It's the Sam's Club draft for me.
I like that analogy. Very well said. And yeah, I am in a similar boat. I don't want to give too many thoughts away, but I echo a lot of those sentiments just with, and I guess too, maybe that ties in with this offseason. We've seen Joe Brady, taking over for Dorsey midway through the season last year, but this is his full, first real offseason at the helm. But then we've got a new defensive coordinator, new coaches in the secondary, new defensive line coach, new linebackers coach by extension, because Bobby Babbitt has become DC. Like maybe there is more of a changing, maybe it's more than just a changing of the guard from a staff perspective. And maybe that leads to more of a change from schematic emphasis or structural fits in some of these pieces. And I think that this draft class is a large, stone in that pond towards kind of not just maybe creating ripple effects, but being more of purposefully placed pieces that reflect maybe a potential new direction in this staff, which is a fun conversation to have. And I'm sure that will come back at some point in this conversation. Bruce, are you ready to dive into it?
I was born ready.
I figured I'd keep the intro banter short, so that way we only go 3 hours instead of 3 hours and 15 minutes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. See,
my wife will be thrilled.
So will mine.
I will come out only partially drenched in sweat from the heat that accumulates off of the computer and all the recording equipment and the lights and everything like that.
I get the same thing. I got the windows open like to keep ventilated, but then I'm always afraid like someone's going to go driving by like really loud on a bike or a car, and then it's going to make, but I'm like, no, I just want to be comfortable and I'll brace it. We are time conscious husbands over here. Respect it. Also, what we respect here on the show, One Pie Pizza. Like I mentioned, the show is sponsored by it. Online menu can be found in the episode show notes here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. I got multiple pies of it over the draft miss weekend. It was delicious. Posted it on Twitter. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, homemade blue cheese. When you get toppings, they sprinkle them up individually. They named a pizza after the Cover One brand and this show, which is tremendous. They're also really good people. They do a lot of drives and initiatives for the community. Alzheimer's Foundation, SPCA, Toys for Tots, partnering with Roswell to knock out cancer. They do a lot of good. So go get yourself some of the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and also potentially do some good for the Buffalo community while you are at it. Bruce, let's dive into it. And for those playing at home, so we're going to go through, like I said, and give grades for each pick that the Buffalo Bills had in this draft. The last three picks we're going to group together and have a larger conversation. But what we're doing, so for each pick, we are grading them on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being absolutely terrible, 10 being absolutely tremendous. So it's a grade for that pick, our evaluation for that player, what we think, skill sets, traits, strengths, weaknesses, or areas of opportunity, and then the fit for the Bills in addition to the evaluation of that player themselves. So again, each pick, we're going to detail their skill set and their traits and how that fit or doesn't with what the Bills do. That leads to the grade. Then we're going to have a floor and a ceiling for each pick. It could be player specific or it could be role specific. And then we're going to discuss whether or not they'll get a second contract with the Bills. For those watching live at home and playing at home, feel free to throw in your answers, your grades, thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, likes, dislikes, anything and everything you got, throw it up into the chat. I will bring things up as much as I physically can, and I will star things that I don't bring up or things that lead to larger conversation, and we'll circle back to those things once we send Bruce on his merry way. Bruce, the floor is yours. We'll start out for your grade for Keon Coleman. If you want to just do his individual grade or you want to lead it right into his fit, whatever you want, the floor is yours. Feel free to speak on the Buffalo Bills selecting Florida State wide receiver Keon Coleman at pick 33.
If 5 is average, 10 is the greatest draft pick that's ever existed. 0 is I literally wanted to spork my eyes out. Keon Coleman gave me a 3.5 vibes.
Wow.
So we know before the draft, this is not rocket science to anyone who's been following me, that I didn't think super highly of Keon Coleman. Like I didn't have a first round grade on him. I had a late day 2 on him. So,
so like a late 3.
Yeah, so like an end of day 3 kind of. Sorry, end of round 3 kind of guy, right?
Cool.
And my comp was Mohamed Sanu. That was my comp for Keon Coleman. I thought he was a possession slot. I think the hands are great. I think the catching technique is great. I think the yak is great. But you can have a good career on that. I mean, Mohamed Sanu had multiple 700-yard seasons, and he was a valuable contributor to a team.
Absolutely.
That's just a valuable possession slot role. It's just not somebody you take in the first round. That's why he didn't have a first round grade.
I think that's also a good thing to say too, because like not every pick is like a home run or awful. There's there's levels to this type of thing, and you could be a productive player for 7 to 8 years, or you could be a flash in the pan or be nothing. There's a variety of ranges on the spectrum in which you could be.
And a lot of it is everything in life is a value proposition. What you give versus what you get. If I tell you that you're going to get, let's go with Gabe Davis. Okay. You get Gabe Davis on day 3 is where the Bills got him, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That was a tremendous value for the Buffalo Bills.
Even if you hated Gabe Davis, you never thought he was
got multiple 800-yard seasons from a day 3 pick.
Yeah.
Right. That was unbelievable. If you told me you drafted Gabe Davis in the first round, I hate that. If you traded up in the first round, I definitely hate it. But you got him on day 3. Here's what we do. We take one part of the value proposition, what we are getting, and then we completely ignore the what we are giving part of the value proposition. Everything is a value proposition. So for me, I thought perfectly reasonably of Coleman, right? He was in my top, I think he was top 16, right? Receivers. So I don't hate the pick, but my view on Keon Coleman was different than the Buffalo Bills. And so the second they draft him, I'm like, do they think he's an X? Do they think he's an X? Do they think he's an X? And then Brandon was like, he's an X. I go, okay, I like it a little bit less. Because historically, players of that archetype have succeeded, right? As a power slot, as a Mohamed Sanu, as a player that you can make the deficiencies minimized.
Especially with how good of a blocker he is and the physicality. It's like, oh, that power slot can be intriguing.
This is going to sound horrible when I say it. Okay. So just go with me a little bit. Okay. Cooper Kupp is not an X.
Yeah.
Okay. Cooper Kupp was fantastic in the role that he played, right? It's not a matter of whether or not the guy's good. It's what does he do well and how is it best maximized? Yeah. So that was my view on Coleman. I know you and I had a different view on, you were higher on Keon Coleman than I was, right? Yes. Going into this.
As an individual player, yes.
Yeah. And then there were plenty of people who were much, much lower than I was on Keon Coleman. Like, I'm literally gonna stab myself in the face if they take Keon Coleman. I'm like, no, Keon Coleman is fine, right?
Some people had him higher too. Some people had him as like wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6. Like they had him pushing the top 5.
So for me, it's one of those, they took him and I'm like, okay, if 5 is, I feel literally nothing about the pick. And 0 is, I literally hate my life right now. It's 3.5. I was like, man, well, okay. And then I was, it's just the way it is. So for me, anything over 5 is I feel above average about it. Okay. And anything below 5 is I feel below average. I can think of markedly more players that I would feel better about. So for me, did Roy Collins in the comments said, I thought Bruce comped Coleman to Calvin Johnson. What? So, and DeAndre in the comments says, I hope Coleman makes you eat your words, Bruce, respectfully. I hope he does too.
We all do,
And that's the thing about this entire conversation, that I'm able to compartmentalize what I thought about Coleman from what I hope happens, because I don't hope anything more than I hope for the Bills to be good. Being right is overrated, right? I would much rather the team be good and for me to be the absolute wrongest I've ever been.
Yes, same.
It's so much better. Like being right is horribly overrated, first off, right? Because it's so random in general, but also when it comes to the draft, it's even more random.
Crapshoot. So
for me, it's a 3.5. And the reason that is because I thought he was a late day 2 guy. So for me, it was a misvalue. In addition, I think the method by which you would maximize them is probably not going to be where they started. So those two things together make me go, if they draft him in the 3rd round and they say, hey, he's a power slot, I feel this is like a 7 for me. but they draft him at 33 and they said he's an X.
Okay.
And that's the difference right there.
Hmm.
And that's where I'm at. And so I'm imagining, based on our pre-draft discussions, that you're probably going to be a little higher on the pick.
So I'm conflicted with Keon Coleman to the Bills for two reasons, because so I am higher on him as a player overall. He was my wide receiver 9. I had a day 2 grade on him, like mid to late, like day 2. And I've said this so much, like everybody after the top 3 for wide receiver, like I felt like I rearranged my order like every single other day. Like I ended up with Xavier Worthy as my wide receiver 4 because I really like specific aspects, and BTJ as my 5, but I flirted with going back and forth. And then I had Mitchell at 6, and I was like, no, should I not have Mitchell at 6? Ricky Pearsall ended up in my top 10. Like I really feel like wide receiver 4 through, like I really feel like wide receiver 4, like through 16, you could put in any order and I wouldn't like be too upset with like anyone, just because of how I had things tiered out and what happened. But with Coleman, so for an individual player, like my grade for him, I graded it in 2 ways. I graded it as the player, and then I graded the player as a fit for the Bills. So overall, just as an individual player, what I had on him, again, on a scale of 1 to 10, I hate going with like percentages or like decimal points, but I have a 7.25 on him as a player, just because I know the slow pieces. We got a couple comments in it already because he ran that 4.61. Don't conflate like 40-yard straight line speed with him being this extremely slow player or a non-athletic player. He is much more athletic than people give him credit for. You see it on the tape. You see it in advanced analytics and metrics and GPS tracking, both at the combine and on tape and in games and pieces of that. I actually want to bring up I know there's that like GPS tracking tweet that has what he ran and moved while he was at the combine. And I recognize both aspects of him. Like I like the ball winning aspect, but I don't like the fact that, he had a 33.3 contested catch rate at Florida State. Now, some of that is Travis, throwing the ball into less than ideal areas and putting him in contested situations that are setting him up potentially for failure and or being late to reads and late to throws, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, if your calling card is still winning contested catches, even if you are put in disadvantageous situations, I'd like you to win more of those contested catches. But then you go back and see what he did at Michigan State, and which is wild watching the tape. Like he looked like such a different player in 2022 at Michigan State, almost to the point that I thought like he was like 2 inches shorter and like 15 pounds lighter at Michigan State, but he's listed at the same height and weight at Florida State in 2023 as he was at Michigan State in 2022. But his contested catch rate in 2022 at Michigan State was 62.5. And it shows like he's up there bossing dudes against Michigan and just winning all these jump balls and doing these crazy things. He catches the touchdown from Jaden Reed. Like he's just catching anything from these contested catch situations. And I liked what he could potentially be based on the size, based on the frame, based on the athleticism, based on the hand strength, the ability to play above the rim and win those contested catches. So I had a 7.25 on him as a player. The fit for the Bills, I've gone back and forth between and again, so 5 is average, so I probably should have gone a little lower. I ended up going with like a 5.5 to a 6 because I don't see the direct fit. I envisioned him more as an X as opposed to you envisioning him as a power slot. But because of the lack of route refinement, because of the lack of deception and overall sharpness to his routes, even when he's winning, he runs a sluggo and he beats the hell out of the corner and he catches a touchdown downfield, but the sluggo is like ugly. It's almost like clunky and kind of plodding. He also had like an undisclosed injury that he was playing through and kept him out at different times. There's all this wonkiness, but I just didn't like what he was as a route runner. And so I liked him in a vacuum as a player. And I was thinking like, man, if he could go, ironically, like, you mentioned Cooper Kupp. Imagine if he goes to the Rams, right? Where you've got Cooper Kupp, who's this tremendous route runner, precision type dude, Puka Nacua, who knows how to find space and movement and is so good at reading defenses. And then you plop in this big wingspan, ball winner, contested catch potential guy as another receiver in that offense. I'm like, oh, okay, I really like that.
The guy you thought Allen Robinson was going to be.
Yeah, there you go, basically. And I paid on that because I took him in fantasy, and that was absolutely terrible. But I could see the fit with that. And so again, like as a player in a vacuum, I liked what Keon Coleman could be, recognizing his faults, but liking some of his strengths and overall, again, what he could be. The fit with the Bills, I just find still a little puzzling, especially considering what we've seen. And I tweeted this on the night of him being picked, considering what we've seen Allen succeed with, which is like more traditional pure separators, the Cole Beasleys of the world, the Stephon Diggses of the world, the Dalton Kincaids of the world, these guys who not only separate, they almost like declaratively separate, like, hi, I'm wide open, throw me the ball, and then Allen throws them the ball. Now, he hasn't had a lot of ball winners or like back shoulder guys or jump ball, throws to guys of Keon Coleman's size and ability. Like, we've never really seen that in this offense. But traditionally, those aren't the type of dudes Allen has succeeded with. He succeeded, again, with more of those true separators, which Keon Coleman is not. So while I like Keon Coleman, I still don't know how I feel about the fit here. Again, I think it could work, but, and again, with a lot of the context and numbers, the contested catch rate in 2023 is not good. There is some context to it, but still, it's not ideal for a guy whose calling card is dunking on dudes and playing above the rim. And I wonder about his fit in this offense that still doesn't have a ton of overwhelming speed, doesn't have a lot of verticality. Now you're adding more of this physical, intermediate jump ball winner. How does he play off of Dalton Kincaid? What do we see? Does this lead to anything structurally or schematically, which is another piece of this conversation? But I like him more as a player than I do his fit in this offense. And I think that's what bothers me the most about the pick.
This is the first opportunity for us to bring up what I brought up at the intro, which is this is the off-brand. But what I said was it's off-brand, at least it has been for a while.
Yes.
This feels like the return to the Kelvin Benjamin, Andre Holmes concept.
Also, real quick, Kelvin Benjamin is not a comp for Keon Coleman.
No,
neither is Gabe Davis. From an athleticism standpoint, a movement standpoint, I don't want to keep hearing it that, oh, he's another Gabe Davis, he's another Kelvin Benjamin. False. Sorry, continue.
No worries. So from a team building standpoint, it feels like a return to the idea of Kelvin Benjamin and Andre Holmes, get these big ball winners. Yeah. And this is what I want to, I want to shine some optimism on this point right here. The Josh Allen has succeeded in the past with separators. Keon Coleman isn't a separator, therefore this won't work. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about this. Mm-hmm. It was 2018.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Josh Allen's a different quarterback now.
Much.
This idea that he didn't that one time 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and now because he didn't that one time when he was a rookie 6 years ago, therefore he won't now, is bad logic. Now, what you're saying is we haven't seen it. And that's true.
But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Correct. So it's true that we have not seen Josh Allen succeed meaningfully with a player of this archetype. But the last time we saw a player of this archetype get meaningful snaps in this offense, it was 2018. It wasn't this offense.
Yes.
That's what I want to talk about. I want to point out the idea that right there is just the assumption that the thing we saw 6 years ago is still true with Josh Allen, and it might not be. I don't know. Yep. Now, it's true that we haven't seen it. That's a real statement. We haven't seen Josh Allen succeed meaningfully throwing the ball to this type of archetype. Sure. But the last time we saw it was 6 years ago. Let me ask you something. I had sweet potato fries tonight for dinner.
Okay? I like it.
I had sweet potato fries.
I like it.
6 years ago, I didn't like sweet potato fries.
Well, 6 years ago, I killed a man with a sweet potato fry.
Right? Murdered a man in cold blood, right? While he slept, walked up behind him with a sweet potato, just shoved it right in his mouth, suffocated him, dead as a doornail.
Oh, I thought you were going to go with he was allergic and you knew that, but I like this way.
This is the reason why I'm on the hunt from the FBI. Right here. Sense. This is why the FBI is coming for me. This is why I'm on the run. Cool. So 6 years ago, I didn't like sweet potatoes. But in the last year, I just tried them. I was like, oh, my taste would change. It's 6 years, guys. That's a long time. This idea that somehow he doesn't fit what Josh Allen was 6 years ago is true, but we don't necessarily know. Maybe Allen thought to himself, gosh, I'd love to be able to throw these contested balls to Stephon Diggs, but I don't know if he's going to come down with them or not. I don't know if he's got that. You know what I'd really like to incorporate on this offense? A little more back shoulder stuff. I'd love to have some size and some ball winners, someone who can adjust the balls behind them, Maybe I'd like to have that. that statement, which is being parroted around a lot, is true. But that doesn't necessarily mean it applies now because it was 6 years ago. It wasn't like it was last year.
Yes.
Or even 2 years ago. So I'm here to try to be balanced. So on one hand, I can say, yes, I thought he was going to be successful in this specific spot with this specific skill set. But also, I don't think that's really a fair criticism of, well, it won't work. No. It didn't work 6 years ago. That's not the same thing.
Yeah, no. And I'm not saying it won't work. I'm just looking at it from I'm a known quantity type of person.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so, hey, like if we're talking food, I'm going to make this meal because I know Bruce loves this kind of stuff. This is what I'm going to make for dinner. I could make something that you've never had before. And I know you've never had. Man, he might, I know this is delicious and this can be really good. I don't know if Bruce is going to like it though. That doesn't mean you're going to hate it. That doesn't mean you're going to love it. It just means we don't know. And that's what gives me trepidation with this pick, is just because we haven't seen it. I wanted a ball winner and someone with a larger frame and bigger athletic profile. I wanted them injected into this offense for a good amount of time. And I'll tell you what too, like just to round out that basketball lineup at wide receiver, like I can continue to talk about. If Stephon Diggs was still here, I just feel much better about this pick because now I'm introducing a different skill set, body type, and frame to a proven product. And now I just have another weapon at the table. What gives me trepidation is that in theory, he's the number 2 or number 3 from a pass target perspective, and I don't have that known quantity. I don't have that sample size of knowing this will work. And because I don't know it will work, I can't evaluate it. And again, to your point though, and very well said by you, that doesn't mean it won't work. It just means we don't know. And I also love that though, like that you pointed that out, because people are taking that as, well, we don't know. So that means it's a dumpster fire and it's terrible and it's a horrible pick. That's not what that means at all. It just means we literally have no idea. And the small sample size that we do have, 1 is a small sample size in terms of frequency and volume. 2, like you said, it was from basically a completely different version of Josh Allen in a much different offense, with also two those players like the ball winner, quote unquote, that Kelvin Benjamin is, and Andre Holmes might be, is completely different than what Keon Coleman is. Again, like I don't want people thinking like, oh, well, big dude runs slower, possession guy, they're the same guy. No, like the athleticism that Keon Coleman has. Dane Brugler said it when I had him on the show. Like, you don't play basketball at Michigan State for Tom Izzo if you're a poor athlete. He is a good athlete. He plays above the rim on the football field. It is a different level. But again, we just haven't seen Allen succeed with someone like that. Doesn't mean he won't. Doesn't mean that he will. And that's the big key for me. And I do the same thing in fantasy football as well. Like, give me that known quantity there. I'll take some swings on some guys, but this is, like you said, a departure from the norm. Could end up being a great departure, but just because we don't know what it'll be is the reason I have more questions on the fit. But again, more questions on the fit than I do the player.
One thing to know before we move on about Coleman is that Coleman did run a 4.53 at his pro day, and for some reason we're ignoring it.
Yes.
So the difference between those two is the difference between the 40th percentile of wide receivers and the 65th percentile for wide receivers. To put that in perspective, Jackson Smith and Jigba ran a 4.53.
And he did not do it at Keon Coleman's size of 6'3", 213 pounds.
So to me,
he plays like a 4.5 guy on tape. He doesn't look like 4.6s. He's not a burner, but he doesn't play like 4.6. He plays faster. No. Do you think he gets a second contract?
Yes.
No. Any particular reason?
I do, because the Buffalo Bills have a tendency to really put a lot of faith. I don't think he needs to be 1,000-yard receiver to get a second contract.
Okay. Because
the Bills have a lot of faith. Remember when they signed Ed Oliver ahead of time and everyone's like, I don't know. The Bills believe in their picks. So I don't think that he has to be stellar to get a second contract with the Bills, because I think that the Bills like to draft and develop. They want to re-sign their own guys. Yes.
I agree. I think he'll get a second contract. Mainly the reason I think Dalton Kincaid is target 1 and number, priority 1 for this offense from a pass catching perspective. And Cook is going to get his in the run game and the pass game. And there's other options with Samuel and Shakir. I think Coleman even if he does well, which is 100% possible, I don't think his numbers are going to blow the doors off the hinges to the point that if he gets to free agency as an unrestricted free agent, he's going to command a salary that puts him out of the Bills stratosphere. Like, I think he'll do well in this offense, and then the numbers statistically won't put him out of the price range for the Bills, and he'll be able to come back. Unless, again, somebody is really betting on the trades and he's, taken off like wildfire, and then somebody comes out and gives him like 15 or 16 or $17 million a year. But also at that point, we don't know what the Bills cap situation will be. It should be a lot better, but yeah, I agree. I think he gets a second contract with the Bills. Any other thoughts on Keon Coleman before we move on?
No, because we're already way behind.
Fair enough.
So
Cole Bishop.
I'm just going to go ahead and just swallow all the thoughts. Any thoughts that I may have had, we're just going to go ahead and I'll come back for the third week in a row next week. Remember those thoughts you had on Keon Coleman? Yeah, now's the time.
We'll play him back and then just build from there. All right, Cole Bishop, pick for the Buffalo Bills, round 2, pick 60. What are your thoughts on this Cole Bishop pick? The grade, the fit, all that stuff.
I like Cole Bishop. Okay. I do. I actually had him a reaction article to a mock draft that had him going in the second round. And I did a kind of mocking or a mock marveling article for Buffalo Rumblings where they had a mock draft that was A.D. Mitchell at 28. And I was like, And then they had one that had A.D. Mitchell and Cole Bishop. And I went, And I said, that's the impact that Cole Bishop has on me, is that he's able to take a pick in the first round and go, ooh. And that's exactly what happened this time around. Although the pick wasn't in the first round with Keon Coleman at 33. Cole Bishop, I said, reminds me much more of Jordan Poyer than he does of Micah Hyde, right? He's better coming forward. He's an aggressive player. He's a player you would feel more prioritized playing closer to the box. The tackle for loss numbers for Cole Bishop in college are just stupid. I mean, safeties don't have that kind of tackle for loss production, right? That's like a defensive end kind of stuff. I think he has 7.5 sacks or something in college.
Yeah,
like just a stupid amount of impact production from a safety. And I want you to think back about the way that the Buffalo Bills fans thought about Tremaine Edmunds.
Oh boy.
What they said about Tremaine Edmunds over and over and over again was, hey, yeah, I'm sure he's good, but like, where are the splash plays? That's what they always talk about. Splash plays, splash plays. Yeah. I want you to understand something about playing defense in the modern NFL. The modern NFL is about making explosive plays on offense, stopping explosive plays on defense, and making explosive plays on defense. That's what this is about. It's about those big impact plays, the big sack for loss of 9, the interception, the sack, the tackle for loss that puts them behind the sticks. It's about that, because this idea that you're going to say, we're going to hold you to 3 yards exactly 3 plays in a row, and then we're going to, you're going to go 3 and out. We're going to hold you to 4 yards every play, and then one time you're going to get 2 yards, and that's going to be where we're going to stop you. Like, that's not how defenses work in today's NFL. So what you do is you take players on defense who are capable of making explosive plays. I think we all saw what the addition of Terrell Bernard did for the Buffalo Bills defense when he was healthy in the early parts of last year. And that is, you got a linebacker who made splash plays. Cole Bishop is that kind of player on defense at safety. Now, I'm not comfortable right now putting him in single high and saying, hey, your hips could flip either direction. I hope you figure it out. Like, that's not what I want to do, and say, hey, you know what? There are goes on both sides. I hope you pick right. Like, that's not, door number 1 or door number 2, right? I always make the Price is Right joke with the single high safety. But have I ever made that? I don't think I've ever made that joke on here before. But
I don't think you have either. I've heard you say it, but I don't think on here.
Yeah. The Price is Right is the single high safety thing, door number 1 or door number 2, right? But for me, it's about splash plays. And Cole Bishop, if you play him in split and you roll him down and you ask him to cover short zone and you ask him to cover half field and you do the things that don't just put him out there on a random island a la Greg Williams and Jabril Peppers, putting him, 20 freaking yards off the line of scrimmage. Just don't do that, right? With Cole Bishop, he can make a play for you. He's a playmaker. And that's what I want on defense, because that's what I think wins in today's NFL. Make a big play.
What's your grade for him?
7.
Okay. Oh, I was close. I had a 6 point. So again, I'm going decimals. I have a 6.75 for him, like the player himself. I had a 3 on him, but again, like you're a pick 60, it's almost round 3. Same thing with like having a grade of a 2 on somebody, you take him at the back end of the first, fine with that kind of stuff. So I had a 6.75 on him for individually as him as a player. And then, but I had a 6 for him with the fit in the Bills. And it's weird for me with him. Like, I think he'd be awesome in the Patriots defense that they've had the past couple of years, or the Baltimore Ravens defense. I think he's best suited to me as, and you talked about it, like, I think he's best suited as an apex or like a slot, big nickel. He got used off the edge at Utah. They would use him in a variety of different in spaces and situations, but I think he's best. The closer he is to the line of scrimmage, the better he is. And by association, or I guess, continuation, the farther he is away from the line of scrimmage for me, the worse he is. I think he's best used as a buzz safety or a robber, like sideline to sideline, in and around the box, in and around the line of scrimmage, deep, especially from a single high perspective. Like you mentioned, like I do have some concern there for as athletic and as versatile as he is. He's got some stiffness in his hips and or just his overall change in direction. And so if he gets turned the wrong way, when he's flipping and going back the other way, it's usually not ideal. And it's against a variety of body types, skill sets, receivers, tight ends, all that kind of stuff. And I think that shows up in single high for him in addition to the two high stuff. And so I like the versatility. Utah's tape was also fun. Like just watching Cole Bishop and then Vaki and then Jonah Ellis. Like they had some dudes that are just flying around, like just crushing everybody. I wonder what his fit is, because to your point, or maybe I don't necessarily like his fit as much as I do just plugging him in with what they have at safety. Like he is more Jordan Poyer than Micah Hyde. And so is Taylor Rapp. And Mike Edwards can do a little bit of everything, but if he had to twist my arm, he's more Jordan Poyer than Micah Hyde. I wanted more of a free safety, rangy presence, eyes, trigger, processing piece in that back end. And not that Cole Bishop can't do that. I think he reads well. He's got a good football IQ. But I just think we have another safety that's more into that Jordan Poyer mold, or into, again, like if the Bills didn't have Taron Johnson, I like the idea of like, man, you can go big nickel and like throw Cole Bishop in there. Like where he succeeds and where he wins and where I think he's best suited to be deployed, I don't think necessarily right now exists on this defense or has. Like I question what the fit is. Again, maybe he's just going to be a regular safety, and it is what it is, which is fine. But with how he was used at Utah and what you can do with him, I wonder, do they just kind of point him in one direction and point and shoot over here and try to hone him as more of a deeper field safety? Or do they use him as this monster man, jack of all trades everywhere type of dude? But they traditionally haven't done that with that position. But again, to our conversation with Coleman and your piece in the intro, maybe this is more another move of a potential departure from traditions or departures from the norm, and kind of seeing what he may unlock defensively in terms of where he goes, what he does, and all that kind of stuff.
Funny story. I had Cole Bishop in my predictive mock draft for the Buffalo Bills, and I took him out at the last minute and put in Gadrion Taylor Demerson for exactly the reason you just said.
And I like Bishop more than DTD, but I would understand DTD.
But DTD fits as the rangy free safety. That's exactly what I did. I actually took him out and moved some picks around and was like, oh no, we're going to go DTD because I don't know if they want another guy who's better line of scrimmage. I don't know if they want another blitzer. I don't know if they want another Jordan Poyer, because now I was thinking Taylor Rapp and the new guy, or Mike Edwards and the new guy. That's what I'm thinking, right?
Yeah.
Well, now it's looking like Taylor Rapp, who gives way to Cole Bishop and Mike Edwards.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a different kind of succession plan than you previously thought, because you want everything to line up nicely in this bottle, and it just doesn't do that.
Doesn't. No.
Anyway,
yeah, it's a weird piece. It's a weird fit. Not necessarily, I shouldn't say weird. It's not an obvious or streamlined fit. Again, maybe it is a potential move in a different direction, similar to the conversation Terrell Bernard, replacing Tremaine Edmonds. The Bills use Terrell Bernard differently than they use Tremaine Edmonds because their size differences, frame differences, skill set differences. You saw Bernard blitzing and how good he is as a blitzer versus what Edmonds is. So again, maybe this is a departure, from that type of role and mold. Do you think he gets a second contract?
Yes.
I do too. I think the versatility will earn him a role. The one thing though, I could see him going in a direction in terms of like a floor. I could see him panning out kind of like an AJ Epinesa, where he sticks around and he's like playing well, but the conversation is always like, yeah, but you're not really getting the value of him as like a round 2 pick. I would have loved him if they took him in 3 or 4, but as a 2, man, but I think his versatility will continue to get him, contracts and continue allow him to earn his keep. I do echo your thoughts with the playmaking aspect. I'd love to see him make more plays on the ball, especially as a safety, like deeper. I'd love to see more of the impact plays and splash plays. But again, fun skill set. Let's move on. Duke, defensive tackle, Dewayne Carter. The Bills took him at pick 95. What's your grade? What are your thoughts?
7.5 is the
okay.
grade for Dewayne Carter. I went on record multiple times before the draft as saying that if your draft included Dewayne Carter in the 3rd round, I was going to like your mock draft. So I'm a simple man. I see Dewayne Carter, I click like. I mean, it's just, I like what I like,
Fair.
You put wings in front of a guy, he eats the wings. Like, that's just the way it works.
That's true.
Dewayne Carter for me is the ideal Jordan Phillips replacement. He is somebody I want to bring in on pass downs. I think he brings energy. I think he has cardio for days, which means if you fall behind or if you're in a pass heavy situation for the opposing, team, you can have him on the field and feel very comfortable that he can handle the snaps. If Ed Oliver were to miss time, you can feel very comfortable he would be able to play that 3-tech position. Now, I do think that there's some underdevelopment when it comes to his pass rush repertoire. I mean, it's a lot of bull rush, right? It's just a lot of bull rush, right? And I like
every once in a while with a spin though.
And shockingly competent, but it only shows up like 3 times or something.
Yeah.
So for me, I'd like to see a little bit more. But if you have one trick and that one trick's really good, that's still valuable.
Troy Franklin,
right? As long as the one trick is really good. So for me, I really like Dewayne Carter. Right? Ignore the fact that it's leadership and character. Just on the field, I think Dewayne Carter gives you what the Buffalo Bills were hoping they were getting when they brought back Jordan Phillips, which is that high energy, backup rotational 3-tech who can come in and you don't lose reps when Ed Oliver has to come off the field. Now, Ed Oliver has historically played more snaps on the Bills defensive line than any other defensive lineman. But maybe that's because they didn't feel that they had somebody who could come in and do it, and they don't have someone who can come in and do it next to him either. So when Daequan Jones wants to come off the field, he is 32 after all, and coming off of a pec injury. True. And so I love Daequan Jones, but if I can get to a spot where it's those 3 rotating, I feel much, much better than, gosh, I sure hope one of my defensive tackles doesn't have to go off the field. How many times have you had a situation unwind where you get stuck in a defensive front and all of a sudden someone will tweet out, John Smith and Bill Jones are starting at defensive tackle right now for the Buffalo Bills. And you're like, what? Where's Ed Oliver? This is a big down. Where's Ed Oliver? Where's Daequan Jones? It's because you got stuck with players on the field that you don't think are ideal. So for me, I am all in on Dewayne Carter. I think I'd like to see a little bit better get off of the ball from him, but he has pop in his hands. Like when he hits you, you know it. Yes. And so that's one of the things that makes the bull rush only, quote unquote. That's one of the things that makes it work is the fact that you have big hands, and when you hit somebody, they know it. There's a difference between punching and leaning.
Yes.
And sometimes you watch people who are bull rush players, but they don't have pop in their hands, and what it looks like they're just leaning on players. They're leaning on them.
Yes.
Right. And that works great as long as you have an offensive lineman who doesn't anchor.
Yes.
Right. But the entire idea behind popping your hands is that you're stopping them from being able to anchor because of the jar, and they have to then re-anchor. And by then you can move on to your counter move. And I know I'm getting way too into the weeds, but the fact of the matter is that I like Dewayne Carter, and I think that there's still room. I know he's an older prospect, but I think there's still room when it comes to Dewayne Carter. So yeah.
Do you think he gets a second contract?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And the reason I think that is because the exact same thing that you said about Bishop, I don't think he's going to have the stats with Ed Oliver playing in front of him where you're going to have to pay a ton of money.
So I'll work backwards. So I think he'll get a second contract as well. And the literal thing I wrote was, I think he'll be a solid rotational 3-tech who won't ever outplay his role statistically, thus being affordable and able to earn a second contract. Yeah. I'm in a similar boat with the grade, but again, I broke it up. So I have a 6 on him as an individual player. He was my defensive tackle 10, but I have a 7.25 on the fit. I just gap penetrator, upfield disruptor, and then off the field character stuff, right? Captain, leader, like how much he hustles, pursuit angles on the field, everything you look for from a character perspective and a behavioral perspective on and off the field. He ticks the boxes. I do think his skill set lends itself well to being like the rotational 3 and the guy behind Ed Oliver. The only reason I'm a little down on him in terms of like on the field aspects, he gets displaced too often for me versus double teams and even for some one-on-ones. And that displacement can either be horizontal or vertical. Like sometimes he just gets chucked and just, you could drive a bus through the hole, or he tries to jump something, gets grabbed the wrong way, thrown about a little bit. Yeah. But to your point, the good initial pop, shock in his hands, that extension that he gets, but then sometimes, actually not sometimes, like a little too often, he'll get that knockback and he'll get that control. Also ridiculous sized hands, like 97th percentile for hands, which is, and you see it. That's why he has that pop.
He hits you with bricks.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Like he's hitting you with bricks and it shows, but he'll get that pop and shock and that knockback and that control. But then I'd like to see him disengage sooner than he does. He has reps where he wins and he's in control. And I'm like, oh, he's going to own this rep. And then he doesn't disengage in proper time, and the running back goes right by him or runs right through him. And he can only get a shoulder because he gets that pop and that control, but doesn't disengage. But at the end of the day, again, I think he's a solid rotational piece. The character stuff is awesome. And I do like some of his pass rush moves, mainly just tied to that juice. And if you can improve that get off a little bit, if you can improve some of that, not just the shock, but add some of the shed to it, the playmaking should go up a little bit. And again, to your point, at the end of the day, like, we're talking about a guy who's not going to see, he probably sees 45 to 50% of the reps. Maybe game script changes some things here and there, but you're putting him on like when Ed Oliver is getting rotated. So you have a dude that's going 100 miles an hour 100% of the time, who fits the scheme, who fits the one gap mentality and style. Like, I think his play style, his frame, and overall how he operates on and off the field is a very, very, very good fit with this defense. I just want to see, some tweaks to improve, again, what he does against the run. Like, I trust him more against the pass than I do against the run. Like, I'm worried, and it's a shame too, because actually, no, let me put this in perspective a little bit. He showed up better against the run at the Senior Bowl, which is what attracted my eyes to him. Like, he was not getting moved from the point of attack. Like, he was anchoring, he was holding his ground, he was chucking dudes. Then I watched the tape and saw how much he was getting displaced, again, against double teams and versus one-on-ones at times. So maybe based on the timeline, the tape, granted, even though it's a larger sample size, the tape happened before the Senior Bowl. Maybe he was banged up, or maybe he corrected for those things, and maybe the guy we see at the Senior Bowl is more of who we see in the NFL. And if that's the case, I like the player even more so, because my questions for him are more around the shedding and the anchoring and not getting displaced happening versus the run than it is against the pass. But at the end of the day, I think a solid rotational piece. Nice. Anything else before we move on?
Nope.
All right. Now, the next pick from the Buffalo Bills, running back from Kentucky, Ray Davis at pick 128. I know this, running backs are usually round one type of dudes for you, Bruce. So I know this is probably bad value in the fourth. But nonetheless, give me your thoughts.
So for me, Davis is a 6. Now, okay. I like Davis. Now, I had a lower grade on him than this, right? I thought he was a mid day 3 kind of guy. This was early day 3, a little bit earlier than I would have preferred. But when I look at running backs, I look at running backs from the perspective of, I do not want to sign a running back to any sort of meaningful money after their rookie year, and I don't want to draft him in the first round. Yep. So because of that, there's certain things about Ray Davis that I don't care about, that are negatives for other people that aren't negatives for me.
Yeah, his age doesn't matter to me at all.
I don't care.
I'm not giving a running back a second contract.
I don't care that he's an older prospect as a running back. I don't care at all. I don't care how many carries you had in college. As long as you can make it through your rookie deal, I don't care. So for me, those are huge negatives for a lot of people when it comes to Ray Davis, and it's just not for me. I don't care. I think stylistically he was exactly what you wanted from this type of runner. Now, I know that the one block that Brandon Bean referenced got all the attention. overall, I would have liked to have seen more from Ray Davis in pass protection.
Agreed.
So I liked that one. That rep that Brandon Bean's talking about was awesome. But now everyone's like, well, he was an awesome blocker because this one thing that we saw that was awesome. No, that's not true. I don't think he was an awesome blocker. I think he has natural hands, and I love that about him. I love the fact that you can put him on the field for James Cook, and the idea that we would throw the ball to the running back is not taken off the plate. I like that a lot.
Absolutely.
But I did think that with the concerns you had about James Cook and pass protection, that they would draft a better pass protector as a running back.
Fair.
So I was surprised by that part. So I actually had Ray Davis in my mock, my predictive mock, but I had him in round 6 in my mock. So I like Ray Davis. I think he's exactly what you needed. I think you may have overdrafted him, and I'm surprised you didn't get somebody who was a better blocker, but I really enjoy him.
I'm in a similar boat with the pass protection piece. Like, I guess I assumed, there would be more of an, I'll say like pass protection element to whoever they brought in. And what I like about Ray Davis from a pass protection standpoint, starting with that piece, he is willing, and I do think he scans well. Like, he picks up blitzes, he recognizes. There's a game against Mississippi State. First time he tries to pick up their linebacker 14, like, he gets railroaded and gets wrecked. And then he picks him up 2 more times after that and adjusts each time and gets better with each rep. So the first rep, he loses horribly. The second one, it's like 50-50, maybe 55-45 Davis. The third rep, he undercuts him, flips him. It's a win for Davis. So he scans well, and he reads well, and he's willing, but the technique isn't always there. And for me, there is some encouragement there, because the first step is being able to read it, see it, process it, and then the willingness to go and act on it, which I do like. I'm in a similar boat from a grade perspective. I gave him a 6.5. I gave him a 7 on the fit, though, just because he can do a little bit of everything. And tying this for the future, I think he gives you a good baseline as the incumbent should you choose not to re-sign James Cook in 2 years. And I don't know if that comes as a shock to anyone. I know it doesn't come as a shock to you, but James Cook, second round pick, 4-year contract. It's already been 2 years. He's got this year and he's got next year. If you choose not to re-sign James Cook, you've got Ray Davis, who has this skill set that allows you to go in a multitude of ways in adding another running back. You could add a bigger, more power back to Ray Davis. You could add more of a pure scat back. You could add more of a pure speed back to Ray Davis. And that's because I really think he does almost everything at an above average level. He's very similar, and I don't know if this is going to be good or bad for anybody. He's similar to Devin Singletary, and I feel like he's like a mixture or an amalgamation of Devin Singletary and Zach Moss with overall frame, skill set, how he plays, all that kind of stuff. I think he's got some real good ability to kind of make you miss in a phone booth type stuff. His hands and his route running are legitimately underrated. His ability to find space and his feel for space coming out of the backfield on screens or releasing out of the backfield when he doesn't have anybody to pick up, and his ability to just, sit over the ball and catch something and make guys miss and get yards that are like hidden or yards that are not there and take a 2-yard gain and make it a 5 or a 6-yard gain. I like that. And despite him, not being a birder and running his 40 in the 4.5 range, 4.52, he breaks off some long runs. A 75-yard touchdown against Florida. He can function in gap. He can function in zone. Again, I think he does a little bit of everything and does almost everything at an above average level, which is solid as your 1B or solid as your RB2 or just solid in the rotation with James Cook and Ty Johnson. And again, I like how that skill set plays should you choose not to sign James Cook, which, again, I'm in a similar boat, like, don't give running back second contracts. But should you choose not to sign James Cook, Ray Davis gives you this nice solid baseline where you can go in a multitude of directions to complete your running back room and kind of go forward. I don't have him getting a second contract. I'm guessing you do not as well.
I do not.
Okay. Anything else on Ray Davis before we move on?
Nope.
All right. The law firm of Sedrick I messed it up because I was switching the graphic.
Pan-Granger.
Yeah, Sedrick Van Pan-Granger at pick 141, center out of Georgia for the Buffalo Bills. Great on the player. Thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, everything. What do you got?
First off, I'm going to make VPG happen. Okay.
So I like it because it's too many. It's too many.
From here on in, we're going VPG.
Okay.
With him. So I really like the pick. I have it graded a 7.
Oh, okay.
So I was a fan right? I know that the pre-draft process wasn't as kind to him as potentially it should have been, but the tape is good. And like I mentioned at the top of this is an on-brand pick for me. The on-brand pick is that he reminds me a little bit of Mitch Morse. Now, I'm not going to say that he's that level of player, right? But from a stylistic standpoint, I think he does well to pull, hit moving targets. I think he stays attached. I think that if you wanted somebody who can be a center that is going to consistently fight for leverage, he's going to be mobile enough to allow you to run pin pull and do the things you need to do without having to take a lot of that stuff off the table. Because if you think about it, Mitch Morse was a key piece to the fact that you could run pin pull, right?
Absolutely.
And you're replacing him now. And you're replacing him with an athlete who's good enough to do that. Let's not do this thing where we just assume athletes like Mitch Morse grow on trees because they don't. So this idea that you could just plug in any center and pull that off, I don't know if you've seen what it looks like when your center misses a moving target on a run play.
Rough.
You haven't seen it for a while because Mitch Morse was so good at it, but it looks super ugly.
Yeah.
Like you watch it back on all 22 and it is one of the cringiest things to watch back the week of the game. You go, yikes. Because here's what you always think. What could that run have been if that center would have connected?
Yeah.
Right? If that puller would have connected to a moving target. And I understand. You have to understand. This is a 300-pound man who's usually 6'4". He's pulling out and trying to connect at a weird angle with a safety who's usually 6'1", 205 pounds, coming downhill, who moves a lot faster than him. It's really hard, guys. Like, it's super duper hard. So for me, when I look at center, I think to myself, gosh, you're kind of spoiled. I mean, you went from Mitch Morse to Connor McGovern, who can totally do that, by the way. Connor McGovern is that level of athlete. And then you go and draft VPG, who's exactly that type of athlete. This is so on brand for the Buffalo Bills. And I was a fan. I like it. I do understand the path to playing time is weird here, because now everybody's immediately saying, well, is Connor McGovern going to slide? I don't think so. I don't think Connor McGovern is going to just suddenly just go back to left guard after everything that they talked about this being the succession plan for Mitch Morse. I don't think they were just making it all up. So the other thing about him is you kind of wonder if he's a center-only player. Now, the Buffalo Bills, Aaron Kromer clearly believes he can play guard. Right?
Yeah. Do you? Because the arms are very short.
Yeah. So this is not an Eric Wood thing where you draft your future center and you put him at guard and say, well, just kind of bide your time, right, until Jeff Handgardner is done.
Oh, God.
Right? That's not the way this works. I personally think he's a center-only. So
his arm length is 31 3/8 inches, which is the 5th percentile.
Just so you know, that lower's bad there. In case you're listening in, 5 is bad.
He's like the Roger McCreary of
oh my gosh, that's excellent. So there's some significant Tyrannosaurus Rex vibes.
Yeah.
No question, right? So for me, that's the weird part for me. So if I was doing it 2 grades the way you're doing it, the fit for the Bills right now, because I don't think he's going to start, is kind of weird because you don't really want a backup center who's a center only. But from a brand standpoint, this just tracks for me. And I like his tape. It's a 7.
I had a 6.75 on him as a player, so I'm in the same wheelhouse. And then same thing on the fit. The only thing I questioned is the path to the field and the path for playing time. Because like you said, like overall who he is, like the NFL size and play strength, he's built well, really good grip strength, which allows him to latch on and torque or turn or seal dudes, whether it's defensive linemen, whether it's linebackers, good hand placement, leader, multi-time captain. Again, we continue to see this theme. Like he seems like he checks a lot of the culture or character boxes that we know this team likes. Plenty of experience, playing at a high level in the SEC, starting several years for Georgia, championships, playoffs, all that kind of stuff. Good awareness and pass protection. I think he can move enough. It's weird. Like I feel like he moves well, but he's also not the best athlete. And I feel like he does better finishing in space than he does climbing. I'd like to see him stay attached more climbing to the second level, but I think some of that is both in space and when he climbs to the second level, he's always looking to like take dudes' heads off. Like he's trying to finish guys. Like there's times where I feel like he could put two hands on somebody and drive them. And instead he just dips a shoulder and he's trying to run through somebody's face and put them like through the field, which is awesome to see. But I also had some questions about that with Osiris Torrance last year coming out of Florida in terms of climbing to the second level and staying attached there. And he cleaned up a good chunk of that through the offseason with Cromer. And yeah, I know Cromer, or what was it reported that VPG said that Cromer said he believes he can play guard, or that he can play guard. And
I think Bean said he can play both.
Okay.
And Bean said Bean said that Cromer said that he thought he could play both.
And I like that, which is nice. Like that would make me feel better. I don't see it because the arm length, but I'm going to trust whatever Cromer says because he knows offensive line a hell of a lot more than I do. But just the overall size, frame, arm length, movement, I question it. I love the physicality in terms of his finishing. He's good at recognizing stunts in games in space. And then, his path to the field, really interesting. Like, if Edwards struggles at left guard and VPG is doing fine, do you move McGovern back to left guard and then put VPG at center? If McGovern's struggling at center a little bit, do you move him back to left guard and put VPG in? It's a nice musical chairs option that you could potentially have. I do still think it's weird that the Bills showed their hands so early with being like, oh, yeah, David Edwards is going to be the left guard and Connor McGovern is going to be the starting center. Like I still find some oddity to that considering how tight-lipped they are and kind of showing their hand. But I like the player. I like the fit. I will never be upset at, going offensive line at any point. I thought he'd go earlier. I had a 3rd, 4th grade on him. I thought he'd go earlier. So him sitting there in the 5th, I thought it was good value, the fit, the player, all that kind of stuff. Do you think he gets a second contract?
Yes, because I think at some point he's going to be a center.
Okay, I have the exact same reason. Anything else before we move on?
Nope.
All right. Washington linebacker Edefuan Ulofoshio at pick 160. Bills love their linebackers on day 3. What are your thoughts on Mr. Ulofoshio?
I had Ulofoshio as a 4. So I was not as high on him as some of the other media and content creators. I think that Ulofoshio is a special teamer first and foremost. Love the physicality, love the tackle radius. I think I love the finishing ability. I love the physicality, right? A little bit more of a thumper than I prefer to see in my linebackers. I think that the range is a little bit overstated with Ulofoshio.
He's athletic, but also like not
stiff.
very. Yes, he's not nimble or fleet of foot. He's athletic, but almost like a plotter.
Right. So it's one of those things where if he's moving in a straight line, you're like, wow, this guy's an athlete. And if he's forced to deviate from the straight shot, like at all, then all of a sudden he's moving.
The change of direction is clunky. When he breaks down and tries to move, you don't see fluidity and athleticism.
And so for me, I think that right there is a great callback to the conversation that you and I had about Keon Coleman. Do not confuse moving quickly in a straight line with athleticism, because it's not. And if ever there was an example of this, it's Keon Coleman and Ulofoshio. Those are the two opposite ends of the spectrum. Keon Coleman is a really, really, really good athlete who just happened to run a slow 40 at the combine and then ran a completely acceptable 40 with weight adjustment. It's actually a really good 40 at the pro day. The 40 had nothing to do with the reason why I was down on Keon Coleman. Everyone assumes that it's the 40. I did my tape study on him. Like, he was my second write-up was Keon Coleman.
Nice.
My second total write-up. It was January when I did the write-up.
I'm in such a similar boat with him because, like, I'll be like, oh, I have concerns. And people are like, the 40. And I'm like, no, the route running, the stem work, the lack of deception, the refinement that he needs, like the footwork. And they're like, oh, so not the slow 40. And I'm like, no, not that.
Not the slow 40. So for me, Ulofoshio is the opposite end of that spectrum. You see him move in a straight line and you go, wow, this guy's really, he's really, making something. And then you see him have to change directions. Like he'll misdiagnose something and have to make himself right. And it's like, whoa, no. And that kind of thing, everything I just talked to you sounds like a heck of a special teamer, right? Running really fast in a straight line and then being physical and tackling and finishing sounds like a special teamer. Exactly. So for me, I wasn't as high on him as some other people in the space. I have it as 4.
Okay, fair. I'm in a similar. I gave him I was torn with the whole because again, 5 is average. I gave him a 5, but I gave him a 5 on the player and a 5 on the fit. really just because I think he can be a solid special team guy, and they have to start to replenish that pipeline. I don't like the idea of going with that in the fifth round. But again, fifth rounders making the team, being significant contributors. I think we've been spoiled with day 3 guys like Matt Milano and Taron Johnson and Gabe Davis and, Dane Jackson. Again, I know he's a bit polarizing, but the fact that you got like a high-end CB3, low-end CB2 on day 3 and Dane Jackson, like I think, day 3 guys, especially when you're pushing the back end of the fifth, being significant contributors in some form or fashion, you'll take it. I think I think his ceiling is maybe like a linebacker 4, maybe linebacker 3, but I really think he's just a special teamer and a depth linebacker who, like the Tyler Medikevich role, where he's, 3rd or 4th on the depth chart, but he's not seeing snaps on defense. He's a core special teamer. I think that's what he is. It's similar to your point, like I'm not even going to go too much into it. Yeah, like it just for someone who I didn't watch him a ton going into the process. I watched him more once the Bills drafted him. The first thing I did was look at his spider chart, saw the athleticism, saw the profile, and was like, wow. And then watched him and was like, oh. And so that was a bit disappointing, maybe because of my expectations that went in. Do you think he gets a second contract?
No.
Okay, fair enough. I went 50-50. It depends on how good he is on special teams, because if he develops into a core guy, then I think he could see a second contract. Moving on, Troy, edge, Javon Solomon at pick 168, 8 picks later after Mr. Ulofoshio from Washington. What are your thoughts on Mr. Javon Solomon?
And we're going to close down the individualized discussions with another, this is totally off-brand.
Absolutely.
In fact, Brandon Beane basically admitted it was off-brand because he said, hey, we really thought that the 3-4 teams would kind of think more highly of him. Yeah, so did everybody else in the world. Like, we all thought that. Everybody thought that. Most of us didn't even, hand to God, I did not do any meaningful work on Javon Solomon before the draft because I immediately said, well, he's a 3-4 guy.
We talked about this pre-show. So the Bills traditionally, for their drafted edges, look for guys from a height and weight perspective that are 6'5", 272 pounds. Solomon is almost 6'1". He's 6 foot 7/8, 246 pounds. And for reference, his height at 6 foot 7/8 inches for edges is a 0 in the percentile column, and his weight is 8th in the percentile column. Very off brand from a size perspective.
I have a 6.5 on Javon.
Oh, okay. I like it.
I went back and I watched Solomon. I was like, this guy's so much fun.
Yes.
Yes. And at some point, I'm just going to go ahead and admit a bias. Okay. This work that we do, I did this before I had a podcast. I've been doing this since like the early 90s.
So I did it for 54.
I did it for fun, like 20 years before I ever had a podcast. It's just, I just like doing it. So I have a bias toward players who are just fun. Like if I have a good time watching you, I'm going to be biased toward you because ultimately this is supposed to be fun.
Yes.
And you'll watch more and then you'll get the endorphins and then it'll be this whole self-fulfilling prophecy where you'll feel good about it because you like that one thing. So you'll watch more and it'll make you feel more good about it. Solomon's just fun to watch. So I understand that the height is not where it wants to be, but the length is definitely where it wants to be. And I think that there's a surprisingly large number of pass rush moves in that repertoire.
Yes.
And I think that the length enables that. And so this is a very different conversation than the Dewayne Carter conversation where I was like, okay, it's bull rush, bull rush, bull rush, bull rush, bull rush, bull rush. Spin, bull rush, bull rush, bull rush, bull rush. Solomon has moves, right? And I know that with that size, what am I going to say? He can get swallowed up by physical tackles. And once they latch him, he's not unlatching.
Yes.
And you would think the length would allow him to do that, but this is where the height actually does matter, right? The height matters from a leverage standpoint. The height matters from a vision standpoint. It's not just latching. It's not just getting unlatched. It's knowing where to unlatch. Like which direction am I going? And so I know that we have this conversation that we don't care about height because we only care about height as it relates to length when it comes to linemen, right? And that's a conversation that happens a lot pre-draft. I don't care about height. I only care about height because it correlates with length, right? I want
Yep.
long arms, and taller people have a tendency to have longer arms, right? And hip elevation is not something I worry too much unless you get a tackle who's quote unquote too tall and you're 6'8" or 6'9". Then I worry about it. And it's the whole thing, right?
Yes.
But this is where height matters, because I do feel like if he was taller, he would have a detachment plan more often. If he had a detachment plan more often, I think he'd be able to detach a little bit better. But I think that it's really about this type of player with this type of production. And there is an archetype in the NFL for this type of player. Elvis Dumervil, James Houston. Like, there is an archetype for this type of player. And so you take a player like this late in the draft, where it's, round 5 pick, what was it, 168 or something like that?
Yep, 168.
Like, I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
It's so weird to see him. So again, 0 in the percentile for height, 8th for weight, but 51st for wingspan, 63rd for arm length, and then 96th for hand size. And then some of the explosion metrics, 86th in the vertical jump, or 86th percentile in the vertical jump, 67th percentile in the broad jump. And then, yeah, like you said, like, you watch the tape and, the production that he had, leading the NCAA in sacks last year. He also is the career leader in sacks at Troy. And this is a school that produced DeMarcus Ware and OCU and Yora. So the production, the length, he's got some bend, the hand usage, but it's the moves and the plan that go along with the burst and his effort and his motor. And I also think what's nice is Troy used him as a 4-eye, which is wild considering his size. For those who don't know what a 4-eye is, that means you're lining up on the inside shoulder of a tackle, which is putting him at a disadvantage given his size overall in frame. And when you watch him on the edge, and again, he's using a cross chop, he's dipping, he's bending, he's using a long arm, then he's using the long arm and lifting the outside arm of the tackle and pulling himself through. Like, you see the hand usage, the plan. He doesn't stick to one move. Like, he pokes and prods and tests the cage a little bit and then builds on things and goes from there. And he's able to do that because he understands how to rush the quarterback, but also has the moves and the athleticism and the length to be able to execute them. And again, to echo your point, his smaller size will put him at a disadvantage, I think, overall versus the run and or versus bigger power-based tackles. But watching him be able to have multiple moves, again, plan as well, and transition those moves, chain those moves together. I also think, and I said this on Saturday, this is a huge compliment for me, he has some velociraptor to his game because of how attack-minded he is, the juice that he plays with, the relentless nature that he has. I gave him a 5.75 just because I think some of the pieces are an outlier, but I gave him a 6.5 as a fit because Greg Rousseau, I think, is an edge one from a run defense standpoint. I think he's still developing his plan and his move set as a rusher. We don't know what Von Miller is, like we talked about. AJ Epinesa overall has been like an edge 3. Can he be a 2? I like the idea of them having, just not a closer, but someone to kind of come out of the bullpen that is a specialist. And even if he is just a pass rush specialist, they need that juice. They need that plan in this edge room because maybe Epinesa takes a step forward, and he has each year. He's made incremental improvements. But Casey Toohill, Kingsley Jonathan, like, who's your edge for? What does that look like consistently? And just, again, the archetype that he is, the departure from the norm at edge that they've looked for, aside from Von Miller, I think is really intriguing. And yeah, just, again, it's the production tied with how he won. And you saw that type of versatility, again, in his moves and his plan, the hand usage to go along with the speed and the burst, and all that kind of stuff. And I think it just makes him like a really intriguing guy. And for them to get him that late, and not even necessarily where they got him, but yeah, I just didn't think he was on the board because of how much of an outlier he was versus what they've gone with. But lo and behold, here he is. Do you think he gets a second contract with the Buffalo Bills?
Wow.
Right? This is the hard one.
This one's my most difficult one. I'm going to get super ballsy, and I'm going to say yes.
Oh, I said yes, too.
I'm going to get super ballsy and say yes. And I know that's very, very, very uncommon. If you look at the mid to late day 3 pass rushers who have gotten second contracts with their team, the number is small. It is very, very small. But I don't know, man. Like, there's just something about this guy. I don't know. Maybe I'm letting my fun bias me.
No,
Real
that's
quick,
fair. I said yes. And even though he is 23, I also don't know what the long-term option for them at edge looks like. Like you have Greg Rousseau, and then you literally don't know what else you have after 2 years from now. So why not?
You're right. Real quick, Anthony mentioned 4-eye. Okay. If you're on the offensive side of the ball, you're playing Madden. Okay. The 2-hole is between the center and the guard. The 4-hole is between the guard and the tackle. So that's where 4 comes from. And then I is the inside. So you're the inside of the offense's 4-hole. That's where 4-eye comes from. So just in case you're wondering how to do that in your head, that's the way you do it. You do it from an offensive perspective, not from a defense. If you do it from a defensive perspective, it gets weird because you're used to right being even and left being odd. So just there you go.
I do that all the time, depending on like the vantage point from film, and like if it's behind the defense, the camera, I have to be like, oh, he's on
stage left.
Yes, exactly. Because people would be like, I thought you said he was versus the left tackle. I'm like, no, the left tackle from the offense's vantage point, which is the right from this view of the camera. Yeah, it gets so messy. Anything else on Javon Solomon before we bring this home? All right. Moving on, grouped the last 3 picks together. Tylan Grable, offensive tackle from UCF. Daequan Hardy, nickel slot return man from Penn State. And then Travis Clayton, rugby player, international piece. Any thoughts on these 3 individually as a whole? Did you like the swings that Brandon Beane and the Bills took on these guys? Do you find anything useful from them? Do you think any of them make the team? What are your thoughts on these 3 before we wrap you up here?
I would like to address the idea that the Bills didn't double dip on receiver in these 3 picks first.
That's my point too.
So, number 1, I wanted a double dip at receiver. This has been well established.
Same.
Number 2, this was not the time. Let me explain. So we're talking about verticality being a concern in this offense, and it is a concern in this offense. I want to share with you why it matters. It matters because of the threat of verticality. Okay. It's the threat. It's the idea that your safeties all of a sudden are not, 20 yards off the line of scrimmage or 18 yards off. They're not like, 11 yards off the line of scrimmage because you don't have that vertical aspect of your offense that's going to scare people. If you draft a receiver in the 7th round who has speed, he's not seeing the field enough snaps to have that matter. At that point, you're just checking a box saying you got a fast guy. But that's not why I wanted a double dip. I wanted someone who's actually going to play snaps because it doesn't matter what traits you have if you don't get on the field enough that the defense actually has to accommodate for you.
Fair.
So I was pounding the table, double dip. And then after a certain amount of time, you go, all right, well,
the dream is dead.
The dream is dead. And you move on. So if you say, well, I wanted the Bills to double dip, you wanted them to double dip in the 7th round. What are the odds, right, of that guy coming in, playing meaningful enough times that the things that you have as traits are now threats for the defense? It doesn't matter if you're fast. It matters if you're a fast guy who's consistently on the field. That's what matters. So this is exactly what you do. This is exactly what you do at the very end of the draft. You take gigantic swings on absolute freaks, and then you get a punt returner. That's what you do. So I have zero problem with these last 3 picks as a group because this is the exact type of strategy that you want. You want people you're going to stash because they're freaky. And if you're going to succeed, you're going to be a freak. That's just the way it is. So get freaky athletes at the very end of the draft. People who I don't know, what's football? I don't know, but I'm a freak athlete. Let's draft him. That's what you do. And you fill super duper niche holes like kicker or punter or long snapper or punt returner or things like that. That's what you do at the end of the draft. So for me, I wanted a double dip, but double dipping in the 6th round doesn't mean anything to me. I wanted to double dip in round 4.
Fair.
I want to double dip in round 3. That's where I want to double dip. So for me, I wanted to double dip, but I'm not going to lose sleep over not drafting somebody in the 6th.
That's a fair point. And I'm still in that mindset. There are a couple guys who, instead of, taking Grable, I like Christian Mahogany, the guard from Boston College who went after to Detroit. I would have liked that there. I did like Ryan Flournoy from Southeast Missouri State, wide receiver, some size, some speed. I like what he did at the Senior Bowl. But again, how much is he going to play this year? Kind of taking more of a flyer. There were some other guys who I liked instead of who they took here for each of these picks. But to your point, you're taking guys in the 6th round, 7th round. I have no problem, taking an upswing or an upswing, like taking a swing at guys with traits or tools or athleticism or measurables and seeing what they can be. Again, for all we know, like Hardy with his return experience and his ability at that, like maybe that's the guy, maybe, and then that's a win, right? If you can get a good return man, and like we talked about the last time you were here, man, this return game this year, especially from a kick return perspective, might be something that wins and loses teams games with how it's going to change and what it's going to mean and how much it or may not matter. So maybe Hardy finds some value there. Maybe Travis Clayton turns into something. I'm not horribly upset at a team taking some dart throws or some swings at the plate late here and kind of basing things on traits and some athleticism, kind of seeing what you can do. There were other players that I liked more and would have gone with, but to your point, I feel like it is kind of splitting hairs to go and be like, man, no, I can't believe they took this guy at the back end of the 6th round and taking this other person. Although for some out there, yeah, Malik Washington was still available at this point for some of these. So if you really loved Malik Washington, you potentially missed out. And then watching him go to Miami was very didn't Taj Washington also go to Miami?
I think he did. Let me look it up real fast.
I liked both Washingtons, and I feel like I'm being lazy because I have the board in front of me, and I feel like
yes, they did.
Man, they took both Washingtons, jerks. Bruce, any final thoughts before you bid us adieu?
Well, the Miami Dolphins are big students of history. They wanted 2 terms of Washington. American history. Mike McDaniel's big American history guy. Yeah. No, I'm good, man. I got everything out of my system. How about you?
That was super good. Yeah, no, I enjoyed our conversation thoroughly. I started some stuff that I'm going to run through, answer some questions, maybe I shouldn't because I'm falling apart and slurring my speech. Answer some questions for the live chat once you bid us adieu. But Bruce, the floor is yours. Tell anybody and everybody what you do, where they can find you, whatever. I'm sure everybody knows who you are and what you do at this point, but just in case they don't, the floor is yours. I appreciate the hell out of you. Tell everybody whatever you want to tell them.
I do nothing. I'm completely unemployed. Like there's no reason for him to even have me on here. No, I'm kidding. So currently, as of 10:26 p.m. Eastern time on April 30th, I am a writer for Buffalo Rumblings and do not currently have an active podcast, but we'll see. We'll see. You can find me on social media at Bruce Exclusive.
I appreciate the hell out of it. We came so close to being better with time this time. And I think we did improve a little bit because we started a little bit late because we were, talking offline. But I appreciate you taking the time. As always, back-to-back episodes, you crushed each one. I know the chat loved your appearance here again. I'm sure I'll see you on the Twitters and or the podcasting space. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday and the rest of your week. You are one of the best. I appreciate the hell out of you. Godspeed.
Have fun, but not too much.
I like it. Later, Bruce.
Yeah.
Mr. Bruce Nolan on Twitter at Bruce Exclusive. Genuinely one of my favorite guests on this show. And I don't say that just to say it. I say it because it's true. I'm going to throw up a banner that says what we're about to do now, which is questions from, I got to type it out because I forgot to do it, that's not how you spell live, from the live chat. Boom. Saved it, throw it up, boom, there we go. I started a question earlier that I wanted to get back to. And also for those of you playing at home, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything and everything you got, throw it up into the chat. I love to make the show as interactive as possible. I wanted to get Bruce out at somewhat of a good time, so I didn't want to deviate too much from the plan because Bruce and I, honestly, if not for kind of gauging the time and streamlining things, we probably could go like an easy 2.5, 3 hours, but I'm going to circle back to some questions. So I start some things, but anything else that you folks got, if you asked something earlier that we didn't answer, put it into the chat now. If you got something now, whatever, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, throw it up into the chat. Wanted to pull this up from Justin, put up the super chat from earlier. Appreciate the hell out of you, Justin, you've been going super chat crazy the past couple of weeks. So appreciate the hell out of you for that, for being here and for the super chat. And Justin says, great work, Ant. And by cover one, and the little clap emoji. And he says, makes me laugh that Coleman ran a 4.61 and people call him slow. Looked it up, and Brandon Ayuk ran a 4.5. Debo ran a 4.48. Get a stopwatch and realize how close 1/10 is. I think the conversation with Coleman as well, that isn't even just speed-based or straight line speed-based. First of all, like what Bruce said, the idea and the notion of what he ran at his pro day, which isn't really getting reported too much, like a significant difference, like him running in the low to mid 4.5s in his pro day versus his combine time is a significant difference. I don't talk about it too much because I never know how much to trust pro days. Like, I don't know, is their field like running downhill and they're trying to give people advantages? Like, I'm always kind of skeptical or wary of that in terms of seeing what people do there. But also another example of the speed piece for Keon Coleman. So there's the tweet from Next Gen Stats that I had tweeted out a couple days ago that they put out back on March 2nd at the Combine. So it says, despite registering the slowest top speed of, actually, no, hold on. Can I just pull this up? I was trying to share my screen earlier and it was being really wonky and wouldn't let me do it. Well, let me do it now. No, it still won't let me do it now. Hold on, what about now? Okay, it's still not letting me share my screen. This is annoying. Well, I'm going to read it then. So, despite registering the slowest top speed of any Group 8 receiver that was tracked during the 40-yard dash, Keon Coleman showed off his game speed while running routes. Coleman tied for the second fastest top speed of his group while running a go route at 21.71 miles per hour. And then it's got a breakdown of the rest. So, his 40-yard dash time was 22.17 miles per hour, ranked 15th. 19.45 miles per hour on a slant, that was third. 18.10 on a dagger, that was fourth. 21.71 on the go route, tied for second. And 18.47 on a slot strike, that was second. So I know the straight line speed thing. The big thing with Coleman, don't conflate straight line speed in a 40 time with athleticism. He is athletic. If you watch the tape, he's got agility. He's got moves. He doesn't return punts and play basketball at Michigan State if he is unathletic. Yes, he needs refinement in his stems. He needs refinement in his route tree and his route running, the deception, the body language, the feet, the precision, all of those technical refinement, polished pieces he needs work on. But he is not slow. He is not unathletic. He's not a burner. He's not Xavier Worthy. He's not Brian Thomas. I don't even think he's A.D. Mitchell, who is also very fast vertically, but he's not slow. He's got a different type of game, a different type of style. We'll see how that fits, but don't get wrapped up in the 40 time with Keon Coleman. Again, like I said with Bruce, the 40 time is secondary to me. I'm more concerned with what he can do as a route runner and within his stem work. Like, that's been my biggest thing for him the whole time, like the clunkiness and the lack of refinement and sharpness to his routes and his stems, let alone the full route tree. It's just how he runs routes. That is my bigger concern and what I think the bigger concern should be. So don't get wrapped up all in that 40 time piece. Oh, Carl, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for the super chat. Carl says, the Bills had a lot of holes to fill. How many draft picks start? Coleman, Bishop, Carter, Davis, and VPG may all get meaningful snaps. And he says, okay, with an exclamation point, meaning that's good. So I think Keon Coleman is a quote unquote starter. Cole Bishop, I think, is the real interesting one. Like, does he beat out Mike Edwards or Taylor Rapp? Mike Edwards is on a 1-year deal, but like I've talked about on the show before, Taylor Rapp is on a 3-year deal, but he really has an out at the end of next year. Like, he signed a 3-year deal, but you realistically could also make it a 1-year deal for Taylor Rapp. Does Bishop beat out either of those guys? Is he not a starter, but he's seeing work in sub packages? And how do you define that? So I'm not going to call Bishop a starter right now. I'm going to say Coleman starts. Bishop, I have questions about. Carter, I don't think is going to start, but I think he's going to be the first rotational 3-tech behind Ed Oliver, so he'll see meaningful snaps. Ray Davis. Davis is an interesting one, right? Like, who wins that RB2 job? Is it Ty Johnson? Is it Ray Davis? I think Ty Johnson did some good stuff, and Ty Johnson also has some kick return ability to his game, which may swing the pendulum in his favor. But, an early-ish day 3 pick on Ray Davis makes me think the Bills do like him. Again, I don't think he's going to start, but is he the 2 to Cook, or is it Ty Johnson, or is it a 3-man rotation like we saw with Cook, Murray, and Johnson? That'll be interesting to watch. VPG, Mr. Sedrick Van Pan-Granger, I think is the most interesting one, right? I think he has a chance to start at center. I'm not going to bank on it. I know some people were saying that, like, or not just in like the Bills fan or community space, but, him being drafted, and it was like, oh, there's your starter. McGovern's going to move back to left guard. I don't think that's a guarantee. It wouldn't shock me if he wins the starting center spot. I don't think he's as good of a mover in space as Mitch Morse. I don't want him pulling as much as Mitch Morse, although he does do some good work, on tunnel screens and stuff and getting out in space and finishing dudes, but he does fit their profile to a degree. I do have some questions on his ability to like anchor. He has to do the hop step to anchor from time to time. It's almost like he doesn't have, enough sand in his base type of thing. But the hands are good. The awareness is good. The football IQ seems to be there. He ticks everything from like a character and a mental perspective, and even some of his play style pieces. If he comes into camp and lights the world on fire and you kind of can't keep him off the field, I guess it really comes down to, does Cromer think, and McDermott, I guess, as well, but does Cromer think he can play guard? Because if so, then it's this weird grouping between Edwards, McGovern, and VPG, because is VPG center only? Does that mean he has to beat out McGovern? Does that mean if Edwards struggles, they move McGovern back to left guard where we know what we have in him there, and then you put VPG at center? If you think VPG can be a guard, is it him versus Edwards? And now you're trying to figure out just how to get the best five out there on the field. He's a really interesting one. I also think, just in general, not to jinx anything in a negative way, offensive line traditionally does not stay healthy. The Bills had a very odd year in a good way last year by having the entire starting five together for the whole year. I wouldn't anticipate that happening again. So he might see some snaps just due to injury or attrition or stuff like that as well. But that's a very good question. Also had one star from earlier. William saying, what do the picks suggest about adjustments you see the Bills making? More physical on offense. I tweeted this out yesterday. Yeah, like they do have a bit of the basketball lineup now, right? Like it was guard heavy, but now you've got some more bigs with Coleman and Matt Collins. I'm factoring Dalton Kincaid into that conversation as well, but they don't really have overwhelming verticality or speed in the wide receiver room. They don't really have overwhelming separation in the wide receiver room. And again, I'm including Dalton Kincaid in this mix. If you're just thinking about wide receiver, it goes even less a little bit from a separation standpoint. But they have a little bit of everything now in the wide receiver room. I think they do have that kind of true basketball lineup presence where you've got a point guard, a shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center, 6-man coming off the bench. You can run the ball. I wonder if this is just going to be more of a matchup-based offense, but leaning into some more of the power aspect. Maybe, again, more 12 personnel and condensed sets and run the football and generate explosives through play action, or getting Josh Allen on the move, moving the pocket and doing some things like that. Like, I wonder the direction this offense goes in with the selection of a Keon Coleman. Because, again, he's not that true field stretcher. He can get deep. And again, if you get him deep in one-on-one situation, just have him run 20 yards downfield and chuck the ball up and see if he can moss a dude or dunk on a dude, which is 100% possible. It's a hard way to live that way consistently, though, right? Like, even if your calling card is contested catches, that's a hard situation to win in consistently in the NFL. Like, winning 50-50 balls is a hard thing. It's a reason they're called 50-50 balls. So many things have to work out, and you have to be so good at it consistently for you to kind of earn your keep and have that return on investment. But yeah, I just think it's a different potential shifting or changing of the guard, given, even with Curtis Samuel, who's fast and can run some routes, he's not necessarily a true separator. He's more of like a, not power guy, but more of like a powerful speed mover in terms of how you can use him and what he does. And then you have Shakir, who's more of, I think, a traditional separator and can work underneath, but it can also get vertical a little bit. Kincaid is this separator underneath, and in the intermediate can win vertical depending on what the matchup is. So I think it's more of this matchup-based offense based on multiplicity and variety, where you can lean into different pieces with personnel, alignments, and different groupings in certain situations. So I think it's different than more of the traditional spread them out, separate, and win that way, like they've been in the past several years. Let me go back. I saw a whole bunch of comments come through. Pop saying, I'm glad they didn't double dip a receiver. I would rather have Cole Bishop than either of the next two receivers pick, Malachi Corley or Jermaine Burton. Ooh. Bills are electric saying, are you glad Bean made 10 picks at 10 different positions, or do you wish he had traded up in the third for Roman Wilson or in the fourth for Troy Franklin? Ooh, good question. I wasn't too high on, so in this specific example, I wasn't too high on Roman Wilson. I loved him at the Senior Bowl, went back and watched the tape, didn't love him on tape as much as I loved him at the Senior Bowl, which was disappointing. Troy Franklin, I wouldn't have been okay with taking him in the fourth. I wouldn't have traded up for him, even though the speed is nice and that would be a nice thing to add to this Bills team and to the Bills room. I'm just not a big fan of Troy Franklin. The route running, the stem work, the hands, the contested catching, I didn't love it on tape or even really like it too much. And I also think a lot of his speed, although it is tremendous on tape and was tremendous at Oregon did a good job of using college spacing and college hashes to their benefit. And for those who don't know, college hashes are wider. So if you were on, the left hash, there's much more space to the right side of the field than there is in the NFL, where the hashes are closer together. And so he's just got oodles and oodles of space to work with. And with that speed, where he's already faster than most of the guys anyway in college, he really did work with that. So I wasn't too much of a fan of Franklin. I wouldn't have traded up for either Roman Wilson or Troy Franklin, but I would have liked to have a double dip. I would have liked to have another receiver in round 3 or round 4, based on who was still available and on the board. I just think they needed it for this grouping. And again, it's not the end of the world that they don't have it, but you're sitting there now with, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, Justin Shorter, Andy Isabella, Tyrell Shavers, KJ Hamler, Brian Thompson, Quintez Cephas. It's just, I would have liked another upside weapon or another dynamic added to the group. Not the end of the world, but I would have liked another receiver. I wouldn't have traded up for Roman Wilson or Troy Franklin in this specific example, though. Amy saying, Anthony, have you ever seen a 5'9" man hit a 42.5 vertical jump before, like Daequan Hardy did? Wow, go Bills. Malik Mustafa, the safety I like from Wake Forest, he's not 5'9", but he's like 5'10-ish, 5'11". I think he hit a 42-inch vert. Yeah, some of these dudes, man, just have bunnies and bungees in their legs, and they are able to just explode out for testing, and it's really, really cool to see. Cameron saying, did you also want to double dip a receiver early? If so, once Franklin made it to day 3, do you wish the Bills grabbed him? His analytics are great and his speed was great. So similar one for Troy Franklin. I kept calling Troy Franklin a false god throughout the whole draft process, mainly because people were speaking about him as this complete receiver and or saying that he was going to go early, or he was going to be the guy in day 1 or day 2, or take him at pick 28, take him at pick 60. I wouldn't have touched him until day 3. I had a 3rd and a 4th grade on him, but closer to like a 4th. I just wasn't a fan of Troy Franklin from the jump. He was one of the first receivers I watched, and the speed, again, is legitimately great. Even if you were disappointed that he only ran a 4.41 at the combine, but just the speed, the movement, the body type, the frame, the lack of refinement, and sharpness or suddenness, and the route tree, stem work, all that kind of stuff. I just wasn't a fan of anything really other than the long speed, which is a nice, if you are a one-trick pony, it's nice that one-trick pony is an important trick and you're good at it. I just didn't love his game. So even if he was still there at pick 128, I think it's fine to consider him there. I wouldn't have been upset if the Bills took Troy Franklin at pick 128, but he wasn't really a guy that I wanted the Bills to take at all. I'm going through. Sorry, I'm literally just going through and scrolling comments until I see things. Nikki G saying, "What up, Nikki?" Nikki says, "Unless we're going to 3 safety sets, Cole Bishop won't beat out Rapp or Edwards, at least at the beginning of the year." Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to see. How much burn does he get this year? Is it situational? Is it sub package based? Is it straight up? Like, does he come out and set camp on fire? And again, with Rapp and with Edwards, I'm actually going to look up Taylor Rapp's contract now. Where are we? Because Mike Edwards is only on that 1-year deal. Where is Taylor Rapp's dead cap? So Taylor Rapp's dead cap hit this year is, like, say they were to cut him this offseason, he carries a dead cap of 3.675. If they cut him next offseason, it's only a dead cap of 1.33, which really isn't anything crazy. And then Mike Edwards, I'm going to look up. So again, Rapp signed that 3-year deal, but really could function like a 1-year pretty easily. And then Mike Edwards signed a 1-year, $2.8 million contract. If the Bills cut him this offseason, it would be a dead cap hit of $1.6 million. So not ideal to ever incur dead cap, but if something goes sideways with either guy or Cole Bishop sets the world on fire, you could potentially cut either. We'll see, though. Ooh, TP saying, does Hamler make the roster? I don't know. KJ Hamler could make it. Wide receiver's weird now. Like, there's not a ton, again, vertical speed. Like, Shakir is faster than he gets credit for, but not necessarily a vertical stretch guy. Curtis Samuel has a grade 40. I don't think he plays as like a vertical stretch guy more than he does like the speed and the underneath and intermediate and kind of like catch a drag and take it to the house type of guy. So KJ Hamler is straight up, straight line speed, verticality, stretch the field, split safeties on a post. He could potentially win a starting spot because of his skill set and the dynamic that he adds to the room, not being regularly present across the group. Oh, Walter says, Ant, do you know what percentage approximately Debo has split lining up from the slot versus the outside? Also, assuming we get Debo, my first thought is that he mostly overlaps Shakir Samuel and not so much outside. So I can look that up pretty regularly. Give me a second. Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel. So for his career, Deebo Samuel. 29.2% of his snaps have come in the slot. And actually, let me make sure I'm refreshing the page. Yeah, 29.2% of his career snaps have come in the slot. 64.8% of his snaps have come out wide. So I think used a lot more outside and on the boundary than potentially people think. His skill set is interesting, though. Like, I do think there is some redundancy and overlap with Shakir and Samuel, but who he is once the ball gets in his hands, I truly think he's such a dynamic weapon versus Shakir and Samuel that even if there is some overlap there, I don't care. Like, the dynamic is awesome. My bigger concern with Deebo, one, I don't think they can fit him monetarily. Like, you have to do so many financial gymnastics to make that happen. But my first thought, if they got Deebo, would be I hope all the soft tissue injuries are behind him because he gets banged up a ton. As a person who has had multiple, seasons of Deebo Samuel fantasy football stock and who grinds NFL tape and watches as much football as I can, yeah, he just picks up too many injuries for me to fully want to commit financially to that basket given the need on this team. But as far as the overlap, I think there maybe is some and potential redundancy, but he's so awesome. I don't care. Pop says, how important is it to have a true field stretcher? I do think it's important. Even if you're not a team that throws the ball vertically, you need to have somebody with the presence to take the top off the defense to make space for your guys underneath. And even too, like in this instance, if Dalton Kincaid is your one, he's so good working in the underneath and the intermediate areas. You want to give him as much space as possible. So one of the ways to give him space is take the top off the defense. And that way he has more room to work in that intermediate area. Not to mention having a field stretcher who can not only stretch the field, but actually threaten downfield and catch passes downfield and win downfield, which is part of the reason why I wanted Xavier Worthy. One, he can take the top off the defense and stretch coverages on the back end to make space for Dalton Kincaid, but he can also win vertically, get behind defenses, and also track the ball and make plays downfield. So it's not the end-all, be-all, but it is important schematically in terms of making things easier on you and just having another button to push. You want as many buttons to push on offense as possible. In an ideal world, you can run the ball. You can run the ball for power. You can run the ball for speed. You can run zone. You can run gap. You can run downhill. You can run horizontal. You can run a multitude of things running the ball. And then in an ideal world, you can run the ball like that and also pass the ball any way you want. You can go play action and hit vertical shots. You can run screens and throw stuff around the line of scrimmage. You can go RPO. You can, win with schematic concepts that are schemed for individual guys. You can win in ways where your quarterback's just reading the defense. You can win on all three levels. You can push the ball vertical. You can hit chunk plays. You can, carve teams up and matriculate the ball down the field. So you want to be able to push as many buttons and pull as many levers as possible. Having a field stretcher and or multiple field stretchers gives you another option. Roy says, what did the tree give the draft? I didn't ask him yet. The tree has been very temperamental. The tree is still decked out in celebration garb for the NFL draft, but I did not ask the tree. The tree has been keeping stuff on lock just because of how important this time of year is, but I'll ask him for next week. As TP says, yeah, I was personally insulted by Franklin's whip routes. Everything that Troy Franklin runs is on the vertical stem, I should say. So goes, posts, some slants, but really just stops, hitches, little things like that. Anything that he had to run that took more like horizontal movement or pacing or lower body flexion or footwork, it just wasn't clean. And the whip route's the basic one. You fake like you're going to slant, you put your feet in the ground, pop back outside. It was clunky. Clunky is the best way to describe it. It was clunky and just inefficient, and he did it like that all the time, and it was black. Charles says, Ant, you think Keon eventually ends up in the slot? I could see it. Actually, before I do that, Kuhu says, thumbs up, people. Yes, please and thank you. If you have not already dropped a like on this video, I say it all the time, and I probably should say it more. Likes are the lifeblood of these live streams. So if you have not already dropped a like on this video, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So please drop a like on this video if you're watching here on YouTube, whether you're watching live now or post-live later. Thank you very much for that. Charles says, Ant, again, do you think Keon eventually ends up in the slot? I don't. I never viewed him as the power slot. I know Bruce did. I understand it. I think you can move him around. I think because of his athleticism and with his size and frame and his skill set and the traits, I think you can move him around. I don't necessarily see him as a Z, but I do see him as, I saw him more as an X who can be moved into the slot, who can be a power slot option. But I think you're looking at him as an X. I think he could end up in the slot just from a usage perspective or like an alignment or schematic piece. But I do think regularly he will live on the outside. But you can also get creative. Maybe you move Dalton Kincaid as the X, and then you put Keon Coleman in the slot. And again, I know it's not the sexy piece or something everybody wants to hang their hat on for a wide receiver. Keon Coleman is a really good blocker, really physical. Like, he puts dudes in the dirt. I put a little montage together of some clips of him just getting into corners and linebackers and safeties and putting them in the ground. So I don't hate the idea of him being in the slot and cracking on edges or cracking on linebackers and safeties. But I do think predominantly he is going to be on the outside because that's what they need. And that's where you want your ball winner, unless you put him in the slot and run some slot fades and stuff, which could happen. So I do think you'll see some alignment versatility and some differences, but I do think primarily he's going to be on the outside. Oh, would you have taken Brandon Rice in the 7th? By all draft experts, he was a great value there. I absolutely would have. I still don't get why he went that late. I didn't love Brendan Rice, but I thought he would go in round 4, round 5 at the latest. So him sitting there at round 7, yeah, I absolutely would have taken Brendan Rice, even though the skill set wasn't necessarily needed on this team. Again, I don't mind taking the high swing upside on, Grable or Clayton, or, if Hardy is going to be a return guy or even add some juice as a nickel, even though he is really undersized and it limits him. Again, I don't hate those picks, but yeah, I would have taken Brendan Rice. Appreciate you, Walter. What else? Seeing a lot of things. Oh, Lo says, I guess my question wasn't a good one. No, I didn't see it. Where's your question? There's so many comments in a good way. I missed things. What was your question, Lo? I feel bad. I don't know what the question is. Oh, I think I found it. Was it this one? It was said that Brady's scheme doesn't scheme wide receivers open. Is this true or is this false? Lo, I'm guessing this is what your question was. Based on it was the most recent thing to your comment. And so I'm going to go with this. No, I don't think this is true. It also depends on what you like, who's saying it and what you view as scheming someone open. Like, scheming someone open could be as simple as, running pick plays to get a guy open and trying to take advantage of a team not banjoing, or, running tunnel screens or bubble screens to a guy or something like that. I do think he schemes guys open. I think there is more of a purposeful or more deliberate design to his plays more than Dorsey. Dorsey was more, hey, read this out, go execute. I think there's more schematic design to Brady stuff. I mean, just look at the running backs, right? Like, what he did to get Ty Johnson the ball, like in those kind of the front side nakeds on the touchdown against the Jets, or the stuff to James Cook coming out of the backfield. I do think he schemes wide receivers open. Ironically, I didn't read that part. I guess more running backs. I think he does more than Dorsey. I'm not going to say that's his. I think he schemes running backs open more than he does wide receivers. And that goes back to his time at LSU. Like, it's the reason Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a first-round pick, because everything he did to kind of scheme him open. So I don't think it's true. I do think he schemes wide receivers open. I think he schemes running backs open more than wide receivers. Where else? Joe says, in your eyes, what is the best way to offset the lack of a true burner given the current wide receiver group? You got to be able to threaten vertical in a different way. So for me, given the presence of Keon Coleman, Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, and then the run game, like to offset the lack of a true burner is I'm going to look into how to threaten defenses and make them get out of too high alignments, or make them get out of a way, make them play in ways that are uncomfortable. So if teams want to play too high on you and they don't want to let you get vertical, right? I'm going to go power and I'm going to run the hell out of the football, and I'm going to make them have to walk a safety down. And then I'm going to start to go play action. And then I'm going to take advantage of the matchups, and I'm going to take advantage of Dalton Kincaid, and I'm going to show up in a traditional like 12 personnel alignment with that safety walk down. And then I'm going to have Josh Allen say something, and I'm going to explode the formation. And now all of a sudden, okay, who's matching up on Kincaid? Who's matching up on Knox? Okay, maybe I'm putting Kincaid out at X, even though I had him attached to the formation at first, and I'm using shifts and I'm using motions and I'm doing different things. If you don't have a true burner, then you have to find ways to still get the ball downfield, or just carve teams up and move the ball in the underneath and the intermediate. You can do that with the run, and you can still do it in the passing game, or you can create more one-on-one matchups on the outside and then push the ball vertically that way. So if you don't have a burner that can take the top off the defense, do you have a guy who can win a one-on-one matchup against a corner if a team is in single high coverage? And that's what Keon Coleman can be, right? Like Keon Coleman isn't taking the top off the defense, but if a team goes cover 1 or goes cover 3 and he's one-on-one with a corner on that side, you can chuck the ball up 30, 35 yards downfield, and he's not, running past the guy and catching it wide open, but it's a jump ball situation 30 or 35 yards downfield, and he wins that. So you just have to find a different way to generate chunk plays. You could do it on the ground, you can do it in the passing game underneath and in the intermediate, or you still could push the ball downfield vertically if you can get the defense into an alignment or coverage that you think, works to your advantage. And again, even if they're in too high looks, cool. Can you push the middle of the field? Maybe you don't have those guys on the outside that are the burners, so you can hit the ball in the honey hole or chuck the ball downfield, but you can put Dalton Kincaid on a route and have him run in between those two safeties. And if they're running Tampa 2, he gets past that pole runner linebacker in the middle, and you can drop it over the middle or push the ball in between those two safeties. So there's ways around it. But a lot of it is just, if teams are going to put the cap on your defense, that's fine. They have more guys back to prevent explosives that way. Can you generate explosives underneath? So if they're going to play 2 high coverages, cool. Can you generate 7 to 8 yards on the ground? Can you get the ball into someone's hands at 5 yards and have them turn that 5 yards into 15 yards because there's less bodies in the underneath and the intermediate. So things like that. So you just have to get creative. Like, you can still push the ball downfield in more one-on-one situations instead of pulling the top off the defense, or you just gouge them underneath in the intermediate and make them have to respect that and come forward and then go play action, hit them over the top, or just create mismatches and pieces like that. What else? Man, there's a lot of comments. I went to the star. I had a bunch of stuff starred, and then it said how many comments were on the live when I came back, and man, there's a lot. What else? Steve says, was Samuel not a vertical threat because of the QBs and teams he played with? The 4.31 speed is fast. Yeah, I just don't think he plays like 4.31, and that might be just me. Like, he doesn't look like a guy, like when you put him on the line, that he's just going to blaze by somebody. Like, he looks fast when he's got the ball in his hands, and like you give him the ball on a drag and he takes off and get up the sideline, but he's just not like a traditional straight line burner, even though he does have that time 40. I'm not saying he's slow, and 4.31 is fast. I just don't think he plays like a 4.31 guy. Like, I don't think he like, so for example, Brian Thomas Jr. From LSU, he ran like a 4.33 or a 4.34 40. He looks like it. Like, Curtis Samuel's 40 time is faster than Brian Thomas's. Brian Thomas looks 10 times faster than Curtis Samuel to me from an acceleration standpoint when the ball is in the air and just running vertical. Now, he doesn't have the shiftiness and the athleticism with the ball in his hands or yard after catch ability in terms of movement and agility that Samuel has, but he plays much faster even though their 40s are basically in the same range. Nikki says, I'm terrified we'll see cover 1 or 0 because we don't have the threat to beat them over the top. Same issues we've had since John Brown. Yeah, but if teams are playing cover 1 or cover 0 now, you have to look at it a couple things. First, it starts with Kincaid, and honestly with Keon Coleman too. Does the defense have a corner or anybody in general that can go one-on-one with Dalton Kincaid or Keon Coleman? And if it's with Kincaid, do you have a corner that's physical enough or long enough or big enough to match him with a size and frame? And if you do, is he quick enough and athletic enough with good enough feet and coverage skills to stick with Kincaid one-on-one? Because Kincaid can cook dudes in a one-on-one scenario. And then it's the opposite. You have somebody with the coverage chops and the feet and the agility and the speed, but they don't have the size to stay with him from a size and frame. And then I think Coleman is a similar piece too, right? If it's cover 1 or cover 0, especially if it's cover 0, if you got Keon Coleman on the outside, yeah, maybe he's not separating and making moves in the stem that are wide open, but maybe you're just telling me, yo, bro, like, just go deep. I'm just throwing it up. Make a play. Like, you might not beat them over the top traditionally in terms of somebody, shakes somebody at the line with their release and gets upfield and they catch it and house it for 60 yards. But you might get a one-on-one shot where you're throwing a jump ball, or you're able to beat them with Kincaid separating, or even Shakir, or you can scheme some guys open, take advantage of that man coverage situation, run some picks, get some guys caught in some traffic and all that crap. that's a potential aspect as well. I think with the size and frame the Bills have with Kincaid and Coleman, you can beat cover 1 or 0 in those ways. Granted, it might be a little harder to win those situations, but you still have a threat because defenses are going to have to honor that piece. What else? This is a good comment here from Charles. Yeah, Curtis Samuel's a 4.3 guy with an average depth of target of 6.6 to 7 yards for his career. Yeah, he was just always used over the ball a ton. I'm actually going to pull up. I had a tweet for it, but I'm not gonna find it. So I'm just gonna go look up what his career average depth of target is. Yeah, his career average depth of target. Oh, no, I'm sorry. His career average depth of target is 9.6, but is really offset by 2 years in Carolina, 2018 and 2019, when he had 12.2 and 14.8. So a career average depth of target for Curtis Samuel of 9.6. But from his rookie year to his most recent year, these were his average depths of target. 9.4, 12.2, 14.8, 7.5, 1 because he got injured in 2021, 6.9 in 2022, and 7.1 in 2023. So the majority of time he's been used in the underneath and intermediate, maybe or low intermediate, more than he has vertically through his career, which is very interesting. Yeah, that's exactly right. What Charles says, like Coleman giving Josh the thumbs up. That's exactly what it is. If you see cover 1 or you see cover 0 and you like that matchup, like you're just kind of giving the nod and snapping the ball, forget what everything else was happening out there. And you're just, hey, like, here's the alert. If we see this, we're doing this. And that's what Keon Coleman gives you, right? Like, he's not going to give you that separation piece and that route refinement aspect that we're used to, or you might want based on what you've seen. But he just gives that ability, to just win jump ball situations. And I don't know if this is to Coleman. This comment here from Miller, defense player here 24, says he's a body catcher, though, from the highlights I've watched. If you're talking about Coleman, go to my Twitter and type just type pro space Ant Keon. Watch all the stuff that I put. The Florida State stuff. Also, never mind. You're talking about Curtis Samuel. So cool. I'll just shut up. Good times. Yeah, I got you. My fault. It's so hard to keep up with the chat. I need a producer to be here to just keep everything here. Yeah, so it's going to be a schematic change potentially for this offense, but we'll see. We'll break down things as we go forward. I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks. Charles, actually a good comment here saying, Ant, watch Coleman on with RG3 if you haven't. I have not. I saw some clips. I saw some clips. I saw like postings of it on Twitter as I was getting ready for the show tonight, but I didn't sit and watch because I didn't have the time. But I will check that out because you're one of several people who have said good things about it. So I'll give that a watch for sure. I'm gonna throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks, because we are going to start to wind down here on the show. If you have not already, please, and thank you, drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. And drop the 45 minutes left of the show banner. Well said. Join myself and Eric Turner tomorrow night, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, for another episode of the Cover 1 Film Room. We'll be breaking down all the day 2 guys, breaking it up into the day 2 and day 3 guys, just because of how many guys there were and how much film there was. So join us tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Film Room. Again, if you have not already, please drop a like on this video, whether you're watching live now or watching post live later. It means a lot. Likes are the lifeblood for these streams. So drop a like on this video if you are here on YouTube. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool as well. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage. That's good for the algorithms over there on the audio platforms. Regardless, if you watch live, watch post live, listening, whatever, thank you very much for your view live or post live, your download, your listen, whatever have you. I'm very thankful and appreciative for whatever form or fashion your support comes in for this show. If you enjoyed this show, tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome it is. If you hated this show, tell your family and friends and loved ones, or not tell your family and friends and loved ones, tell your enemies about the show and try and ruin their day by making them watch this show. I appreciate the kind words that are coming through for the chat. So thank you very much, folks. I'm glad you folks enjoyed this episode. Thank you very much to Mr. Bruce Nolan for joining me back-to-back weeks to wrap up this piece and have things come full circle with him joining me, a month or so ago to do priorities, which set the table for the draft episode he did last week joining me, and then, bringing it here for grades and all that kind of stuff. Go wing forward. That'll do it for us here in this episode of Disguise Coverage. Thank you very much to Justin and to Carl for your super chats and your donations. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, for another episode of Disguise Coverage and or the return of the Cover One Film Room live Wednesday, April 30. I don't know how many days are in April. I'm just going to say Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern live because that's when it drops. And that's when it goes live. Again, tell your family and friends and loved ones, drop a like on this video, rate, review, subscribe, all that stuff. I appreciate all the kind words that we're pouring through towards the end here and throughout the entirety of the episode for myself, for Bruce, for the brand, all of that. Thank you very much. I will see you next week or in the Cover One Film Room. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.